Brian.
Alright guys, it's great to be here. Woo! As you can see, we're out in the park service. It's a very nice park outside. It looks like we're in Big Bear Mountain.
Oh,
Right? It's been great because as a church, we've actually been doing the First Principles study series.
Okay.
And for those of you that don't know, it's basically a series we go through with non-Christians on simple topics such as seeking God, Word of God, discipleship, light and darkness, and so on. And so today, we're actually going to look at the cross.
Wow, come on.
And the cross is actually something that a lot of people don't understand today. America is based off 80 to 90% off Christianity. But you look around and you see the symbol of the cross everywhere you go. Right? But most people know that Jesus died for their sins. But at the same time, not many people truly understand or can connect with the cross. And so for us Christians, the cross is actually something that's very, very personal. We take the cross seriously. It's the reason why we do what we do.
Come on.
And so today, as a church, we're going to focus on the study called the cross, and we're going to recount Jesus' physical suffering, emotional suffering, and spiritual suffering undergoing the cross.
Come on, Brad.
Come on,
Come on, Brad.
You know, it's crazy. Predominantly, we study the Bible with two types of groups of people. Either one type where people are already opened up, God has opened them up, and we're literally just filling in the blanks. When we study the Bible with them, they're like, oh, I've been looking for this all my life, I'm ready to go. But the other group of people that we study with is the group where they know what's right to do in the Bible, but they don't want to do it.
Wow.
I was in this latter category. When I first studied the Bible, I actually studied all the way through, and I knew that the Bible was the truth. I knew I should have lived my life this way, but I didn't want to do it
Wow.
because of my sin and my selfishness.
Come on, Brad.
Right? So how do you get someone who's in that position? They know that the Bible is the truth, and they know they need to live up to it, but what is it going to take for them to make that decision to make Jesus their Lord?
Come on.
And so we're going to start off in Mark chapter 14, verse 27.
Go, bro.
Come on, Brad.
Come on, Brian.
Come on, Brian.
In Mark chapter 14, verse 27, the Bible reads, "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter declared, "Even if all fall away, I will not." "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. But Peter insisted emphatically, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the others said the same. You know, the truth of it is that most disciples, if not all disciples, we don't truly understand how difficult being a Christian really is.
Yeah.
You know, part of the reason why people are deceived in this matter is because we live in a first world country. We have all our needs met on a consistent basis.
Oh, yeah.
And also we have the prosperity gospel being preached by many churches saying that life will go well if you just have a relationship with God. Right? Life will go well if you just put your hope in God and you earn lots of money, you'll be comfortable in your life, everything will go okay.
Wow. Come on, Brad.
And because of this concept, most people do not understand what it takes to become a Christian. You see, Peter up to this point, he was in it for the good times. Right? Before this point, Peter actually witnessed personally many of Jesus' miracles. He witnessed Jesus walking on the water. He witnessed Jesus, feeding the 5,000, right? Snapping his hands, and McDonald's comes out of the air. 5,000 people are fed. Right? Unbelievable. Peter has witnessed all of the good times. And yet, Jesus says, no, all of you will fall away, including you, Peter, my best friend. Someone I've trained for 3 years, you will fall away.
Wow. Come on, Brian.
Come on, Brian.
Come on,
You know what's
Brad.
crazy? Peter right here says, no way. God, not me. Right? Surely not me. I've seen the miracles. I know what's going to happen. Everything is going to be okay. And yet, we go on. In verse 32, it says, they went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, he said to them. Stay here and keep watch. Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that, if possible, the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he found them again sleeping because their eyes were heavy.
Wow.
They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer."
Wow.
It's funny, why were the disciples here so fired up? Right? But Jesus here is actually portrayed as being depressed.
Wow.
You know, it's because Jesus knew that he had to endure the cross. You know, somehow in America we get this idea that Jesus wanted to go to the cross. That was not the case. Jesus knew how intensely painful it was for him to go through this. It's funny, no one wants to get crucified. You think of it, who wants to get crucified?
No.
Not me. No.
No.
It is physically immensely painful to get crucified.
Right.
And yet, Jesus actually asks God, if you may take this cup away from me, but if there's any way else other than going to the cross, please let me go that route. And yet you find here Jesus praying. You know, Jesus needed to pray to get his heart right
Right.
to go to the cross. You know, that's like so many of us, right? I want to be a true Christian, but I don't want to believe that my family is lost. I want to be a true Christian, but I don't want to break up with the immoral relationship that I have. I want to be a true Christian, but so on and so on, right? We can think of excuse after excuse, reason after reason.
Yeah.
Come on, bro.
And it's crazy, right here, Jesus actually feels a deep form of depression, right? It says his heart was overwhelmed with sorrow. You know, personally for me, there were a couple points in my life where I was depressed. One point was when I entered college, and it was during summertime. And I remember I was just in a dark room, and I just remember going through all my relationships in my life. I remember going through my family. I was like, you know, my mom and dad, I know they love me, and I know my friends love me from back home, but I don't feel it. Intellectually, I understand that these people love me, but I don't feel it. And it was a really sad time for me because I went through all the people I knew, and I was like, you know, there's not really one person that genuinely loves me for who I am. Everyone wanted something from me. But you know, I've never been to this point where Jesus literally is staring death in his face. His heart is overwhelmed, and literally he would rather die than go to the cross.
Wow.
I've never been to this point.
Come on, Brian.
And so solution again, you find him praying in the garden. Right? There's so many times where I don't want to do something as a disciple, and the only thing left for me to do is to go pray.
Oh,
And I have to
man.
pray about my heart changing and wanting to do something. Otherwise, I'll simply be bitter and I'll want to fall away.
Come on, Brian.
You know, for me personally, one of the things that I do not want to do, and many of you guys know this, I do not want to go into ministry. And some of you will ask why. The reason is because I know how tough it is.
Come on, Brian.
You do the most amount of work, and you get paid the least. I don't think anyone would want to sign up for that, honestly. And I knew that going into becoming a disciple, I knew that ministry was tough. I knew that I always just wanted to simply stay where I was, to help people, study the Bible, but I never really wanted to take the next step.
Come on, Brian.
And so it's crazy. Jesus went from I don't want to do this to I'm going to do this.
Come
I
on.
must do this for the world.
Wow.
Right
come on.
after he prays. And so how do you think Jesus felt after going back to the garden and seeing his best friends fall asleep? It probably wasn't good.
Oh,
He
yeah.
probably didn't feel good. He saw his friends sleeping, and he probably lost some motivation. He said, I'm about to go
Wow.
through the toughest time in my life. I'm about to go through the cross, and you guys are sleeping.
Come on, Brian.
You know, it's crazy because personally for me, I've been discouraged many times in my life, even as a Christian.
Yeah.
If I set up a plan with somebody and I really want it to happen, and where I get to spend time with this person, I have it all planned out, and that person ends up canceling on me or bails out, I'm really hurt. Right? I get discouraged. Like, I don't want to talk to you right now. and that's the truth. Like, we all go through that.
Yeah. Come on.
And it's crazy. Have you ever felt that? Because
Yeah.
in a lot of places in our life, that's happened to us. But the actions of these disciples, right? Peter and these disciples that followed Jesus, these actions really did demotivate Jesus.
Yeah.
And we're going to pick up in verse 43, and we're going to see what goes on. It says, just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with me swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus, and when they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
Wow.
Be honest, how would you feel if Richie, for example, right? We all know Richie.
Come on, Richie.
Richard.
Yeah,
He-
he cool. He cool.
He shows up at your door,
Oh.
and with him is all his work colleagues, is all his classmates, is all the people that he knows. And Richie comes up to you in the door, and he gives you a kiss. And then all of his work colleagues and students, they come, and they start beating you up and arresting you.
Wow.
You would feel confused, you would feel betrayed, you would feel like, what is going on?
Right?
Wow.
And yet this is what Jesus went through. What's crazy is that Jesus had actually loved Judas the same way that he loved everyone else in the 11 apostles.
Wow.
Where no one knew that the betrayer was going to be Judas. That's how perfect Jesus' love was. And you know what? Have you ever guys felt betrayed before?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know that there was one moment where I got into a car crash with my friend. And because my friend actually had drugs in the car, he said, hey look, I need you to go get the drugs from the car. This was before I was Christian. And I remember risking literally, like I could be sent to jail for this. And I went to the car and I got it. And I had to hide it somewhere just to not get caught.
Wow.
But I remember feeling that betrayal, like you actually risked my future for your own selfishness. And you know what? I'm not the only one. So many of you guys here, like Deli shared, right? She's been raped before. She's felt betrayed before.
Yeah.
You know, how many people actually get into a relationship where they commit themselves and sooner or later they cheat on each other? You know, how many people go through that? It happens in marriage, it happens in your dating relationships, and it's painful.
Yeah.
You know, we've been betrayed, and yet Jesus actually demonstrates the full extent of it. And yet Jesus says in his mind, you know what, I will still go to the cross, because if I do not go, betrayers will remain betrayers for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Jesus set the example. If I don't go to the cross, then men will continue to cheat on their wives, women will continue to cheat on their husbands, and people will give up on their children.
Wow.
People will never learn unless I go to the cross. You know, what I really like here is that, you know, through Jesus going through all of this, he's still going, he still has his head straight, and he's still like, I need to go complete this mission. And you know, what could have Jesus done here? You know, actually in Matthew it recounts that Jesus could have actually called a legion of angels to come and help him. Right, at this point his friends betrayed him. At this point also, one of his best friends came up to his house, literally gave him a kiss, a sting of death, and gets everyone around him to arrest him. At this point, Jesus could have took the easy way out. But you see, the easy way out in our life is never the right way.
Come on.
So many times we have to go the hard route.
Yeah.
And you know what convicts me here is that Jesus really does understand pain here. You know, I remember before I was a Christian, I would always run away when things got tough.
Yeah.
If it hit a certain level of pain, I would basically quit. Yeah, I did that in my relationships. If someone hurt me and I didn't want to resolve the argument, I would just simply not talk to them. And yet Jesus still perseveres.
Yeah.
You know, let's pick up in verse 53. It says, they took Jesus to the high priest and all the chief priests. The elders and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy the temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands. Yet even their testimonies did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses, he asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, Prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. Here Jesus actually knows that in order to save man, he has to go to the cross. And, well, maybe he thought that he could stick it out and endure the pain for his friends, right? But then his friends betray him. But then maybe he thought, I could stick it out, and then Judas comes and he has an army of people ready to arrest him. And maybe before the Sanhedrin, he might think that the spiritual leaders of the world might cut him some slack. Literally, these people were the religious elite. They were the most spiritual people on this entire planet.
Wow.
They were the people that God looked to see God's love in human flesh. And yet, what do these people do? They speak lies about Jesus. They hold a court where one after another, they're saying lie after lie about Jesus. And you know what? Jesus is like, I'm not going to say anything. Because the truth is, whatever I say, you're just going to lie about it and you're just going to refute it. And so they begin spitting at it. And this is where it gets intense, because if you really understand humans, no one wants to be spit at. And in fact, spitting is one of the most disrespectful things in basically life. You think about it, you grow up in high school, and what's the one thing that starts fight? You spit at someone, I guarantee you'll get into a fight like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's crazy because right here, the coward even blindfolds Jesus. They spit at him, they arrest him, they start beating him, but they blindfold him. But why? I believe it was because they were so afraid to look Jesus in the eye.
Wow.
They were cowards. They're like, we know this man has done nothing wrong.
Wow.
But we're going to blindfold him so he can't see us, and we're going to beat him. You know, let me ask you, if you were Jesus, at this point, would you die for the world? Probably not.
No.
Right? I know I wouldn't. Your friends let you down. Your parents think you're crazy. And the supposed spiritual leaders of the entire world are evil and wicked cowards. And yet, why did Jesus do it? It's because he loved us. It's because he really did love us.
Come on, Brian.
You know,
Come on, Brian.
this is something that really sticks out to me, because I know that at this point I for sure would have given up. I probably would have given up at the first, when my friends quit on me. Right? That's how soft I know I can be. And yet Jesus knows exactly how weak we can be. Let's pick up in verse 66.
Come on,
It
Brian.
says, While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with that Nazarene Jesus, she said. But he denied it. I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, This fellow is one of them. Again he denied it. After a little while, those standing near to Peter, Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. He began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man that you're talking about. Immediately the rooster crowed the second time, and then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. He was crazy. Peter right here was Jesus' best friend. And yet he was so pathetic and weak at this point. He was fearful of death. And you know what? That's us. Right? It's too hard. There's so many times in my walk with God where I think it's just too hard. And I live in a first world country. It really isn't that difficult here. We may have emotional problems, spiritual problems, but the truth is that we're not in India, we're not in the Middle East, we're not in places where Christianity is illegal.
Yeah.
And we've had so many disciples from foreign countries die because of the gospel. And yet here we are sitting in a first world country. We think about all the problems that we're going through.
Come on,
You know,
Brian.
Jesus came to save the weak. You know, it's people like you and me, where we need the Holy Spirit. Right, at baptism, when you receive the gift of the Holy Spirit is there for you to help you in your times of weakness. There's so many times in my life, even as a disciple, where I don't think I can do it. Where I simply just don't think that I can go through one more situation. And yet every single time, I know that God's there. I know that He's there to pick me up, and He's going to help me out.
Come on.
You know, we go on to Mark 15, and we look at verse 1. It says, "Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. 'Are you the king of the Jews?' asked Pilate. 'You have said so,' Jesus replied. The chief priests accused them of many things. So again Pilate asked them, 'Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?' But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was imprisoned with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. 'Do you want to release to you the king of the Jews?' asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. 'What shall I do then with the one who you call the king of Jews?' Pilate asked him. 'Crucify him,' they shouted. 'Why? What crime has he committed?' asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, 'Crucify him.' Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. And it's crazy. Jesus right here actually has no crime to be charged against him. And yet, Pilate, being the coward that he is, he's trying to figure a way out how to not take responsibility. You know, Pilate actually represents the person who says, I'm not going to make a decision for Jesus, or I'm not going to make a decision against Jesus. But if you do not make a decision for Jesus, then you are making a decision against Jesus.
Wow.
And you are no longer following God. It's crazy. Right here, it reminds you of X Factor. Right here, we have Barabbas, right here. On one side, the murder. They've caused you a lot of harm. We know he's right here. He's right here. You can pick him to crucify him instead. And we have Jesus right here. We're not too sure what he's done. Right? And then the crowd still picks Jesus. And you know what's crazy? When all these people start accusing Jesus, you'd like to think that one person would have stood up for Jesus. You know, where was all the people that Jesus healed? Where were all the people that Jesus personally met
Right.
and literally saved their lives? Where were Mary and Martha? Where were his closest friends?
Right.
You know, something that really hits me is the lack of gratitude shown here.
Wow.
And personally, I realize that that's one thing that really does demotivate. You know, when you give a ride to someone, when you do someone a favor, you'd usually expect a thank you or, man, thank you so much. And when people don't do that, when people don't appreciate or show their gratitude towards you, it really demotivates us as human beings.
Yeah.
You know, it makes us not want to do anything. And right here, Jesus was simply thinking that, you know, these people just simply don't understand. Even though no one here really appreciates what Jesus is going through, Jesus knows that there's going to be some person out there one day, whether it's 5 years from now or 1,000 years from now, that will appreciate what he's done. And they will take the cross and they will do amazing things because they truly understand what Jesus has done.
Yeah.
You know, without the crucifixion, there would be no forgiveness. No fresh start, there would be no love, there would be no church, because great love is built on great sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, in verse 15, where it says that Jesus was handed over to be flogged. Most of us don't really know how disturbing this flogging actually is. Even the movies that are portrayed these days do not show how vicious the flogging was actually. It was actually used by a whip called the Cat of Nine Tails, and in this whip was broken shreds of stone and all sorts of material in there. And literally, these religious people actually devised a system where they would whip Jesus 39 times because the law said that you cannot whip someone 40 times. So they literally made a system where they would go up to 39 and stop. And they would convince themselves that it's okay. At least I didn't break the law. And this whip would literally wrap around the body and it would tear you into pieces. Literally parts of your skin would cut off. Your most vulnerable area, which is the back, that part would be completely ripped up. You'd see the ribs, and even the ribs, it would rip through, and your face, it would claw your face out. Your eyeballs might even pop out. It was a vicious cycle.
Wow.
And Jesus had to endure this.
Wow.
You know what? This is what Jesus went through. So when people actually try and tempt me and ask me to fall away or whatever it is, a simple question you can ask them and I can ask them is, what do you have to offer me? Even my parents, who I know they love me so much, they spent their years taking care of me, planning for a great future for me. Yet they did not endure the pain that Jesus went through for me.
Wow.
No one has ever endured the pain like this dude.
Come on, Brian.
Come on, Brian.
Yet Jesus right here, he thinks that if I don't do this, there will be no hope for the world. People will be thrown into Buddhism, atheism, Islam, Catholicism, and literally these religions, these denominations have genocided thousands. They've done nothing for the world. And yet Jesus on the cross, it's literally brought salvation to so many. It's healed so many broken relationships. That's why no matter how hard it gets, no matter what role I'm given, I'll do my best to stay faithful.
Come on, Brian.
When we're going into the kingdom, one thing I never thought of was a role. I didn't care if I was Bible talk leader. I don't care if I served as the right hand to the Bible talk leader for the rest of my life.
Come on.
The only thing I care about is making it to heaven at the end of the day.
Come on.
No matter how difficult it is.
Brian.
Come on, Brian.
Let's pick up with the crucifixion in verse 16.
Go, bro.
It says here, the soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him, and when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Right here Jesus gets insulted. Right after all he's done to this point, still he's insulted. And I've been made fun of before, and I've been made fun of very stupid things I've done, but not to this point, where people literally assassinate Jesus' character. And if there's one thing that turns any human being around, it's when people start attacking your personal character for the wrong reason. Nothing hurts more than that. And yet Jesus here, even though he's insulted, he still does nothing. It was at this point, I believe, that Jesus could have just called down a rain of fire, called down all the angels, just destroy everyone. Not one of you is worth it. Not one single person is worth it. And I pick up in verse 21. It says, a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on the right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross that we may see and believe. Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Here Jesus wasn't even strong enough at this point to lift up the beam, to physically lift up the cross. Here you get to see even more of just how painful crucifixion really was. Basically, crucifixion was created to be the most painful torture device in all of humanity. and you would be nailed to a cross. Some would say literally just a single piece of wood like this. And literally nails would be driven through both your ankles and also your hands. And you would actually get to a point where you have to support yourself by pulling yourself up just to breathe, but at the same time your body was getting more and more weak, so you would literally have cramps and you'd be forced to drag down, and then you couldn't breathe again. This was literally suffocation. Jesus literally went through suffocation with the blood flowing through his lungs, and he couldn't breathe. And in the end, you actually become exhausted, and as the blood flows through your lungs, you feel like you're drowning. You know, why would a man that at any moment, who could have changed the situation at any moment, why would he endure this? And yet on his left and right, which are the real sinners, these are thieves on his left and right, he still makes an effort to grant them salvation. One of the thieves, he says, you will be with me in paradise. And in his most painful moment, he still thinks about the lost.
Come on, Brian.
You know, this is what really tries to get me motivated for evangelism. I honestly, there's so many times where it's not because I'm sick where I don't want to evangelize. It's simply I don't want to evangelize. and that's literally why I don't evangelize.
Thanks for being real, bro.
I just don't feel it.
Come on, Brian.
And yet, imagine if Jesus didn't have to.
Wow.
Right? Because we can say, I don't have to evangelize. Right? I have so many other things I can do. I don't have to do this. I don't have to raise missions.
Yeah.
I don't have to help people all around the world. And yet, what if Jesus said, if I didn't have to? You know, verse 33, it says, at noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing near this, and they heard, they said, listen, he's calling Elijah. Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. You know, here Jesus actually experienced the ultimate pain. You see, up until now, even through his crucifixion,
Oh, yeah.
he could have prayed to God. He could have asked God for more strength, for more endurance. And yet, when he takes on the sins of the world, for the first time in his existence, he is separated from God. And he no longer feels the support that he has. I believe here was his ultimate pain. You know, imagine that. Imagine bearing the sins of the world. I feel guilty, I feel pain when I sin myself. I feel regret. I feel like I'm the worst person in the world. But imagine you feeling all of your sin in your whole life, all in one moment. All the shame and guilt compacted into one moment. It would be unbearable to feel that type of pain. And yet Jesus carries the pain of the world. Every single murder, every single rape, every single sin committed was on Jesus' shoulders and on his heart. And you know what? That's why we love Jesus as disciples. No one comes close. No one will ever do anything greater than this.
Come on, bro.
And that's something that we take with us personally. You know, I want to end off this sermon with a story.
Come on, Brian.
And it's very true. And it really says, God the Father and Jesus one day was looking down on the world. They saw all the suffering and pain, and they saw all the people. They saw you and me. Jesus says, Father, how can I help them? I love them. What can I do? God says, Son, you don't understand. They're not like us. But Jesus says, but Father, I'll do anything for them as long as you're with me. God says, you don't understand. The only way to help them is if you go down to earth by yourself. You have to eat like a man, get hungry like a man, get dirty and sleep like a man, and you get sick like a man. Jesus says, Father, I love them. I'll do anything as long as you are with me. God said, son, you don't understand. People will laugh at you and reject you. Your whole family will think you're crazy. Your followers will desert you in the end, and you will be all alone in your biggest house. But Jesus said, I'll do anything as long as you're with me. But God said, son, you don't understand. The people will flog you, they'll beat you, and nail your naked, bleeding body on the cross. Jesus says, Father, I love them. As long as you're with me, I will do anything. Father says, son, you don't understand. As you hang on the cross in agony, you will bear the sins of the world. You will feel their guilt, you will feel their shame and their pain. And their sins will separate you from me, and in your greatest hour of need, I will not be there with you. And Jesus looked at his Father, and he said, now I understand, I will go. You know, I want to close off in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21.
Come on, bro.
The Bible says, to this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. You know, what does the cross serve as for us? It serves as our motivation, and it also serves as our example. There's going to be so many times in your life where you will go through difficult things. As disciples, you will be persecuted by everyone. Your family, people on campus, people at work, wherever. And yet Jesus actually went to the cross so he could give us an example. This is what you must go through.
Wow.
You know, in conclusion, if you're here today and you're visiting our church, I really want to inspire you to study the Bible.
Come on.
To find out what Jesus is all about, what the cross is all about, and why you should become a true Christian.
Come on.
You know, life is tough, but I know that with the cross, everything is possible. Amen.
Amen.